The stadium lights burned bright even though the sun was still high in the afternoon sky, casting sharp shadows across the open-air rehearsal stage where greatness was supposed to be rehearsed and mistakes were not forgiven. Thousands of empty seats watched silently as a famous singer stood at the center, her name already carved into awards and headlines, her voice praised across continents. And at the edge of that shining stage, holding a mop instead of a microphone, stood a janitor no one knew, a man whose life had trained him to look down, not up, whose dreams had learned to whisper instead of shout. What happened next would crack open pride, expose cruelty, and remind everyone that talent does not ask for permission to exist. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel KOneHeartStories. Your support keeps real, meaningful stories alive. The janitor's name was Elias Morin, a quiet man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a posture shaped by years of cleaning other people's messes. By day, he worked sweeping concert halls, theaters, and studios that echoed with voices far more celebrated than his own. By night, when the buildings were empty and the city softened, he would hum while he cleaned, his voice low and careful, as if afraid it might offend the walls. Music had once been his entire world. As a teenager, he had sung in community choirs, small weddings, forgotten corners of the city. But life had been heavy. His father fell ill, bills stacked higher than hope, and dreams were quietly folded away like old sheet music, never thrown out, just never opened again. That afternoon rehearsal belonged to Serafina Vale, a global icon known as much for her arrogance as her power vocals. She was preparing for a televised charity concert, surrounded by producers, assistants, and musicians who nodded at everything she said. When her sound check faltered, irritation snapped through her like static. Her eyes wandered, hunting for a target, and landed on Elias as he cleaned near the stage steps. Someone had mentioned hearing him sing once during a late cleanup, a careless joke that reached the wrong ears. Bored and amused, Serafina decided to turn it into entertainment. She ordered him onto the stage, not to help, not to contribute, but to be mocked, to sing solo where professionals stood, to remind everyone of the distance between fame and dust. Elias felt the heat of every gaze as he climbed the steps, his hands shaking, his heart pounding against years of buried fear. The daylight made everything feel exposed. There was nowhere to hide, no darkness to soften the moment. Laughter rippled through the crew, whispers brushing his ears like sharp edges. He had spent his life being invisible, and now he was painfully seen. Every instinct told him to refuse, to step back down and return to the safety of silence, but something old stirred in him, something stubborn and aching, the part of him that had once believed his voice mattered. The microphone felt unfamiliar, heavy with expectation and ridicule. His mouth went dry, and for a moment, nothing came out. The famous singer watched with a smirk, confident this would end in embarrassment. Elias closed his eyes, not to escape, but to remember. He remembered his mother singing while cooking, his younger self harmonizing softly. He remembered the joy before fear learned his name. When he finally sang, the first note rose gentle and controlled, not loud, not flashy, but honest. The air shifted. Conversation stopped. A second note followed, richer, deeper, carrying a warmth that filled the open space. Then the third, soaring effortlessly, striking a purity that felt almost unreal. As Elias continued, something extraordinary happened. His voice did not strain or show off. It told a story. It carried loss, endurance, hope reborn under sunlight. Each note landed exactly where it should, steady and fearless. The very notes Seraphinas struggled with, the ones she avoided or overpowered with volume, Elias reached with ease. Technicians froze, hands hovering over controls. Musicians lowered their instruments, listening. The laughter died completely, replaced by stunned silence. Even the famous singer's confidence wavered as she realized she was witnessing something she could not control or dismiss. The song ended not with applause at first, but with a breathless stillness, as if the world needed a moment to adjust. Elias opened his eyes, unsure if he had done something wrong. His chest ached, not from fear now, but release. Then one person clapped. Another followed. Soon the entire rehearsal space erupted, not with polite approval, but genuine awe. The sound echoed louder than any rehearsal note that day. Seraphinas stood frozen, her expression unreadable, her mockery collapsed under the weight of undeniable truth. Talent had stepped onto her stage uninvited, and it was impossible to ignore. That afternoon changed everything. Producers approached Elias, not with jokes, but respect. Opportunities emerged where none had existed. But more important than contracts or recognition was the way Elias stood afterward, shoulders a little straighter, eyes no longer apologizing for his existence. He returned to his cleaning that day, because responsibility still mattered to him, but something inside had shifted. He had been reminded that dreams do not expire, they only wait. The famous singer left the stage quieter than she arrived, forced to confront the limits of arrogance and the cost of cruelty. As the sun lowered and the day softened into evening, Elias hummed again while mopping the stage, the same stage that had tried to humiliate him. Only now, the sound carried confidence. He was no longer singing just for empty rooms, he was singing for himself, for the boy who gave up, and for anyone who ever believed their voice was too small for the world. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who might need hope today. And before you leave, a special request, comment the word voice if you believe hidden talents deserve to be heard.